Well, hello, Lisa and Phil and Aaron.
Greetings, Gerald. Welcome.
Now I see
Welcome,
Aaron
Phil.
with two A's. Is that a distinctive spelling?
Um, it's
Normal in the Midwest.
the biblical spelling.
Oh my.
The brother of Moses, I believe,
Oh, there you go.
Aaron.
and the brother of Elvis, right?
Mhm.
I was
Mm.
just in Nashville. My brother works at the my brother and actually sister-in-law both work at the Country Music Hall of Fame. This is a big weekend for them.
Oh,
Yeah.
Is this Elvis's birthday, or what's up?
Oh,
we
I
don't follow
know.
country music a lot.
Yeah.
Oh, the
Oh,
Grammy Awards.
Oh, the
Grammys.
Grammys.
The
Yeah.
Grammy Awards are coming up. And
Right.
Mm.
yeah, I toured the Taylor Swift Childhood Development Center.
Oh,
She
wow.
gave them $2 million for
Nice.
an incredible it's an
Mm.
Let's
incredible
jump ship
facility as
for.
it is, but the
Yeah,
development center's just unbelievable.
that's called a tax write-off.
She drops that much in a weekend in Kansas.
Yeah,
Indeed,
right.
yes, I can see how it might be
It's still
of mutual
still
Well,
benefit.
admirable
a
Sure.
weekend in Paris. It's
Yeah.
still nice. Yeah, absolutely.
and helpful.
Yeah,
Very helpful. I'm not trying to. Yes, I'm not
yeah.
trying to diminish that. I'm just trying to crack silly jokes at her expense. That's all.
Well, there's reasons why things happen, and there can be multiple reasons and causes
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
justifications and whatever. Yes, of course.
Right. Well, Lisa, why don't you introduce our guests?
This week we are talking to
Mr. Gerald Everett Jones,
the author of the Preacher's books.
which is a series.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a series. The one that we're talking about specifically is Preacher Stall's The Second Coming.
That's it.
And Preacher is somewhat almost an agnostic preacher, which I find very interesting.
Yeah.
Preacher Evan Wycliff
Uh-huh.
Wycliff.
has been accused of being agnostic by people in his congregation. He's also been accused of being a faith healer. So I would make a distinction between agnostic and doubter, say, because I would say really even somebody who might count themselves as a believer or as a faithful, when bad things happen, it's pretty human to ask, why, how did this occur? How did God allow it to happen? So there can certainly be moments that that are faith flags, as it were.
Right.
Notably, Billy Graham once said to Queen Elizabeth he had a dark night of the soul in his early career, and then once that was over, he never looked back. I kind of have trouble believing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although,
Well, he's
although, he was a sincere man. Let's put it that way. I certainly believe he was a sincere man.
well, I believe so too. I think, but he also was somewhat of an entertainer. I mean, he got
Well,
huge
personality that could
Yeah.
fill a room of thousands of people. Yes,
Right.
absolutely. I mean, when I was a toddler, I got led by the hand to Billy Graham crusades in Kansas City, Missouri, where I grew up.
Yeah, that's
And
cool.
Did that
I was raised in
influence
Southern Baptist.
Obadiah?
In some ways, you might say I'm tending more on the edge of the New Age these days, but certainly I appreciate that that background. And Evan, as a main character, is very much has elements of my own background and personality. I have him being uh, uh, someone who went to divinity school, Harvard Divinity School, but then dropped out when he found out too much about the Christian church history, and then went to MIT in astrophysics looking for some ultimate answers and got mostly confusion there.
Mhm.
Not that it's not a formal discipline, but it's just that there aren't any hard and fast.
Yeah.
There are no more hard and fast answers in physics than there are in theology.
Yeah. And
So
it is
he
rocket
returns to
science.
Southern Missouri, which is really that's where my ancestral background is, and small town. And there he works as a guest preacher and also a skip tracer or a bill collector because he can use a laptop and you can if you're a data driller you can be a private eye these days. So that people bring him questions and problems that other people just simply don't want to solve.
Right.
The sheriff's got a limited budget, and
Yeah.
so that's how that's the engine that throughout the 4 books. This is the 4th book in the series. And
So he gets
fans have been
entangled in these mysteries. He tends to it would make an interesting television series probably.
well, yeah. Well, I hope so. I mean, certainly,
Very
I
much
feel as
so.
I feel as though the form of streaming and cable series binge watching has changed the way that works like this are adapted because with 13 episodes or however many it happens to be in a season, you have the opportunity to basically dramatize each chapter, as it were, or a few set of chapters. With a
Yeah.
feature film, you really have to condense. And I often say, as an example, I don't think I've ever left a movie theater and say, I miss those guys. But, if I've
Yeah.
watched 4 seasons of Succession or however many there were, it's like I moved out, I moved away from those people. It's like, where are they?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Like missing The
exactly.
Sopranos or who? Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it from a
Mhm.
narrative standpoint, from an author standpoint, it gives you a chance for character development. And I think one of those things, one of the effects, is it helps you understand the opponents, the adversaries, the bad guys, because these are human beings that when they look in the mirror this morning, they don't say, I'm going to go out and do evil today.
Right.
They are pursuing interests that they typically feel are somehow justified. And
Right.
that's actually a mark of Ann Tyler books. They say that Ann Tyler writes from an angel's eye view. That is, there are no bad people in her books. They're just people who do mistaken things.
Right. Yeah. Well, I don't want to spoil too much of the plot of the
Oh
story,
no.
but people should know, that Dr. Evan Wycliff, you pronounce it Wycliffe, I believe.
Is
Yeah,
that
well,
correct?
actually, he's named after the Wycliffe Bible commentaries, and that ends in an E. But yeah,
Yeah.
it was to kind of give him a cachet of
Yeah.
having studied theology, which he did.
Mhm.
But it's set in Appleton City, Missouri, which I assume you know pretty well because you're from Missouri.
That was my hometown of my grandparents going, so that goes 2 generations back.
Right.
And there's a strong tradition of family farming there, but of course that started to go away with corporate acquisition of land. And then the popularity of the Ozarks, just to the south, has become very much of a tourist magnet. And that's really where the economic development is. There's a lot of retirement living on the edge of the lake, especially Truman Lake, which is a bit more sedate. The Lake of the
Mhm.
Ozarks is more like yachts and jet skis and cigar boats. And then also you go further to the south and we were just talking about country music. Branson is kind of Nashville South, and so you've got the casino culture and golf, and that's really where the economic activity is in Missouri these days. Farming is just really not very profitable. An acre of corn does not produce that much profit.
Right.
Actually, I looked it up the other day. The most profitable crop, an acre of strawberries, will yield $30,000 a year.
Oh.
So, but you see, you've got really high risk there because strawberry has very thin skin.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, covered with pests. Maybe you've got a lot of wastage, so you've got to worry about what am I going to use as a pest deterrent, and you know, organic is difficult.
Yeah.
I,
That's the only
whether
berries I'll
or not
eat.
it's more effective, but it's difficult to do because it's not as potent.
Hmm. So you said Truman Lake. So is this somewhat close to where President Truman resided?
Well, President Truman came from Kansas City, and he retired to Independence, which was actually the hometown that where my father's generation moved. And
Okay.
Independence is known as the Queen City of the Trails. That's where the Santa Fe Trail and the Oregon Trail diverged. You know, the people in the wagon train set off from there years ago. Um, and yes, Truman retired to Independence. That's where the Truman Library is. But Truman, you know, Truman was certainly was a Missouri politician. He'd been a judge
Hmm.
before he went to Congress, and then of course he was FDR's vice president. And when FDR died before his term was out, then Truman was catapulted into the presidency.
Right.
And
I guess guess what we're wondering is which came first, the president or the lake?
oh,
Well, the
definitely
lake
the
is
president.
probably older.
Now the
Well, is
you
it
know,
a
whether
man-made
the
lake or a
lake
natural
the lake
lake?
was actually dammed up during his administration, I to tell you the truth, I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
It's certainly named after him, but you see, Truman Lake and Lake of the Ozarks are actually they're both dammed up reservoirs on the Missouri River, but those are two separate dams. So it is not, and they connect. So it's not possible to actually sail from Truman Lake to Lake of the Ozarks because the dam is in the way. And you know, and then you can't go from the Lake of the Ozarks all the way to the Mississippi River for the same reason. So you actually would have to portage around, and that does happen. I mean, you know, if you bought a yacht, the only way to get it to Truman Lake would be to, you know, you'd have to portage it around both dams, you know, with a big truck and you know, cranes and stuff like that. So I'm sure that's how it's done, but I never tried it.
Or a helicopter, maybe.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
That seems excessive.
So this guy, his name was Gropius, right? He found Wycliffe, and he told the story of the deep state maybe staging the second coming of Christ, and what was the comment he said? He said the things that you believe in may be true, but may be different than you understand them to
Well,
be.
yes, it's a combination
Yeah, don't believe what you see.
of the fact that he had done some advanced research in virtual reality 3D displays.
Hmm.
And so he was aware of the technology. And in fact, it was it was as far as 10 years ago that the first successful 3D holograms were done by projecting them into clouds, clouds of vaporous certain chemicals that were kind of sparkly. But Gropius, who's actually just named after the German architectural tradition, but it's just a name. But he shows up at Evan Wycliffe's door, and the reason that he's there is that Evan is kind of noted as a Bible scholar, especially about the apocalypse, especially about end times. Now, it's not to say that Evan is a believer in the end times, but he certainly studied that in divinity school.
Hmm.
And so he's written
So
papers on
he's
this.
a
He's
disgraced
given sermons on this.
televangelist too, right?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Well, Evan was a televangelist for a while as well, and had a show that had to do with debates about, you know, is this a real thing? And, you know, that's a whole subject in itself. But this fellow is trying to warn Evan, um, and I came across this before I wrote the book, and it really stunned me. Was that the U.S. Intelligence Agency back in the early 1960s actually had a plan to fake the second coming of Christ. They were going to they weren't so naive as to think they could convince everybody on the planet, but they were going to park a submarine off the coast of Cuba and shoot off some spectacular fireworks and announce over loudspeakers that Fidel was the Antichrist. The idea being that we'd get Cubans to rebel against him and bring down his government. Well, plan B at that time, if you remember your history, is they also had some plans to use exploding cigars. Well, I don't know that they tried either one of them, but the thing that was really surprising when I got into researching the book is there is actually a conspiracy theory, a more modern conspiracy theory about NASA working with the deep state to, in fact, fake the second coming of Christ with advanced technology, and that conspiracy theory actually has a formal name, Project Blue Beam. So if you search online for Project Blue Beam, you're going to find all kinds of very far-fetched ideas about
you did reference that in the book, right?
Yes, about how this might be used by bad actors to try to convince people to do things that maybe they wouldn't or shouldn't do. Yes, yeah. But the other element in this story, there's been a lot of talk in the current political discourse about resurrecting this idea of internment camps. And I have this unscrupulous televangelist, another fellow who goes by the name Pastor Obadiah. He calls himself Pastor Obadiah, and he's something of a faith healer as well. Sensational, again, a showman. But he has a big religious retreat, a farm near the Appleton City area, and he's been attracting disadvantaged and homeless people there since COVID with promises of food, promises of free food. Problem is, when you get a few hundred people inside there and you don't let them leave, you actually don't have the budget to feed them. So he was telling people to fast and then starve so that they, their demise, their souls would be cleansed, before Jesus showed up again. So right. Those are the two elements. Is this fellow, was Gropius trying to say this fellow knew something about how to produce these sensational effects to convince the world that he's the real thing? Perhaps John the Baptist, maybe not, Christ himself, but at least somebody that could be listened to and obeyed. And does he have political aspirations? Is this some kind of nefarious plot? Because one of the things that's really creepy about this is there isn't a single politician who's complaining that the homeless people are disappearing.
Right.
Yeah.
And you talk about internment camps. It's an irony. It's an irony that people are checking themselves into these places voluntarily.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody had to be rounded up. Okay, because it's a combination of number one,
the fact that full.
Number one, it's partially due to the fact that they are food challenged. And
right.
You're in a part of the country where there's not a lot of employment, even for people who've got talent or training. It's a combination of that and the fact that that many of these people are among the faithful, and they are just simply looking for somebody to follow. And I will say also that, again, looking at our current environment, you can turn on the news every day and hear about talk of authoritarianism, not only in our country, but also in other countries as well. And I would say the thing to consider about this is that it's not so much people being mentally unbalanced or being misled or being somehow off the deep end. It's just plain fear. There are more credible reasons these days to believe the world could end than when I went to elementary school. Okay, when I was in school, yes, okay, there were nuclear weapons, and there was the Cold War and that conflict. So there was one thing you could point to that might end the world. Now take your pick.
There's many of them
water
now.
shortages, famine, global warming, climate change.
The Thermonuclear, yeah, thermonuclear.
Well, and we
war's
still
up there,
have
though.
we still
Yeah, it's
have
still there.
thermonuclear holocaust. You would
Acid
think that
rain's
would
still
have
there,
ended
too.
with Carl
Yeah.
Sagan and the Union of Concerned Scientists that discovered this thing called nuclear winter. You
Nope.
don't have to set off very many of them to extinguish every crawling thing on Earth. I mean, that's what happened to the dinosaurs, basically.
Well,
From-
there's two things I speak to on that front. Number one, people keep saying save the earth, save the earth. The earth's going to be fine. It's the humans that aren't going to be fine.
It's going to be
Number
rendering
one.
the Earth
Yeah.
uninhabitable.
Number
Yeah.
two, the fact that they told us to hide under our desks
yes.
to survive thermonuclear war.
Right.
That was funny. I thought that
Well,
was
you know,
pretty
that
funny. I
you've
was
got to
like,
give
wait a minute.
people some reason to feel that the government's taking care of them, right?
Yeah, you had to tell them
You're
something.
not going to freak everybody
relax.
out and say this is hopeless,
Yeah.
right?
And I'm sitting there, 8 years old.
Run around
going,
and aimlessly
"Wait a
and
minute.
scream.
It's mostly just to
Underneath.
put you in
Wait a minute.
an
You
optimal position.
think if
to
a
put-
bomb goes off, the desk is going to save us?
Yeah.
Well, they can identify the corpses maybe by the seating assignments.
Yeah, well,
Well,
there's
you're
that.
closer
No, that's
to
all
your
vapor.
butt, you
I
kiss-
never thought of that, Aaron. Thank you.
You're in such a position you can kiss your ass goodbye, basically,
Mm,
when you're under the desk like that.
well, the kid in front of you anyway.
If you're flexible.
Right.
And
I
not
So
was.
yes,
bad.
and
I
certainly end times are, you know, in the book of Revelation, the end times are described in great and some might say symbolic detail. You know, the idea that that one would need the mark of the beast to buy bread. Well, you know, there are a lot of people saying that, well, those are barcodes. Or, you know, wars and rumors of wars. And of course, there's never been a time when there haven't been wars and rumors of wars.
Exactly.
But also I will say, and I believe I mentioned this book, and I detailed it actually in one of the earlier books, because again, Evan, when he was engaged to this one woman when he was in divinity school, they took a vacation to the Mediterranean. They went to the island of the Aegean Sea. They went to the island of Patmos, where Book of Revelation was supposedly written by St. John the Divine, not the same guy as John, the Book of John. There were like 5 guys named John, but never mind. But
Only 5?
when you go to the island of Patmos as a tourist, it is a small seafaring island, windswept, extremely damp, and you think, oh, Greece, it's warm. When there are sea storms and when it is winter, that is a forbiddingly cold place to be. And so you hike a mile up the hill to the cave where supposedly John and his scribe hung out. And that's where John dictated the book of Revelation to his scribe. Now, admittedly, John would have been a very well-studied Bible scholar, so he knew what predictions to include in his book. But if you imagine that here's a fellow who is in what you might call rebel cause and being hunted down by the Roman emperor, and people are helping him hide out in this cave, and he's getting just the occasional meal that gets smuggled up to him. And here are these
The occasional magic mushroom.
cold, forbidding sea storms where, you know, no matter how many blankets there are, you're absolutely frozen. Then you add to the fact that that Greek religious practices often included taking hallucinogenics. It's not too difficult to imagine that the Book of Revelation might have been a very, very vivid trip on psilocybin. So,
yeah. Well,
and
don't
also
you think,
it wasn't part of the Catholic Bible for centuries.
Right.
don't you think that that one of the most insidious things is that there are people there that will take these disasters or catastrophic the specter of those events and capitalize on them to foster fear and to actually impose their will on the world. But
Well, I think
as
you're talking about the engine of politics in general, in terms of uh,
Exactly.
even if it's a minor, well, even if it's not a world destroying event. Okay. I mean, consider, we've got a controversy about, the fact that we haven't been able to enact good laws about people all over the planet are migrating much more than they did before. And part of the reason is that their homes have been bombed out in places like Syria, places like Ukraine, places like Gaza. And and then you've got the activity of failed states and governments in Central and South America, where you've got the cartels, abducting people, and even political parties abducting people and just simply get disappeared. So you've got fear driving people over borders, and we don't have effective ways of dealing with that.
Right. Or vilifying
And so
political.
we've got that unfortunate reality. We've got that problem. That is a human survival problem. But we have people who leverage that as, well, we are not going to do anything about that because of that will make this other person that we disagree with look good if we do solve it. I mean, that this is sad beyond
That's
belief.
exactly what's going on now.
Yeah.
So I mean, but see, it doesn't have to be leveraging the end of the world. Although we had Jonestown, we had Branch Davidian in Waco, we've had episodes of that kind of abuse. And well, I mean, Charles Manson's, what is it, mind control over the people that committed murders. I mean, evidently he didn't wield a knife himself. So that's another question we have in this type of situation, where we've got this fellow luring people in effect to their deaths. And yet, if no one will testify that he laid a hand on someone,
Right.
is it murder? I mean, he's just simply preaching what people have. There's certainly plenty of evangelists who preach the same things. They've preached fasting. They might not have preached starvation, but they have preached fasting to cleanse the soul. They have preached the end times. They have preached the end is near. They have leaders of all kinds of religious faiths have established compounds for people to live. So that's not illegal.
So difficult to prosecute, because you had to prove culpability for someone who didn't lay hands on the victims. But
well, yes, and the idea is, if I tell you to incite a riot and you do, what is my culpability there? What is my responsibility? What is my accountability there?
And if you're president and you do
if
that,
I say,
right.
if we look at, and we were talking about authoritarianism again, it's very understandable to accept that people want a strong leader, a strong man to say, I will take care of it. I've got the answer. I'll make the bad man go away. But of course, history tells us that people who speak like that and who promise those kinds of things are often bad men themselves, and they don't end up well. They
no,
end up hanging by their heels in the middle of town.
Never turns out well for them.
Yeah.
Right, Mussolini. I got your reference there, Mussolini.
Well, but it is a timely book, is all I want to say, and it's full of those kinds of controversies, because
but
yes, the question is whether this fellow, this Pastor Obadiah, the question is, and Evan asks himself, because he's a forgiving soul, he says, well, maybe this guy's sincere. Maybe he's simply, I might think he's misguided, but maybe he's trying to help people. Well, it's an open question. And then there is the question of accountability, because the sheriff says, hey, it's a religious compound. I'm not going to go in there with a bunch of squad cars. What if they got semi-automatic weapons? What if these are, white nationalists or whatever? They deserve to live in peace. Just let them do what they're doing. These people are making their own decisions.
Here's my thing there, though.
Can you turn the phone off, Phil?
And the sincerity. We have to speak to the fact that someone died. Is that what he meant to happen?
Hold on.
because more than one someone died.
All right, hold
That
on.
is the
Sorry,
question.
we're-
That is the question. And I, when I made the decision from a standpoint of plotting fiction,
Mhm.
Evan's world is Southern Missouri, is that part. And so if I wanted to have this plot, I had to set it there. And I thought, okay, yeah, this can happen in third world countries, and you can have large tracts of land that where people just kind of disappear and people lose track of them. But how could that happen here? We've got
Right.
GPS mapping devices, and we got drone overflights, and we've got social media and cell phones and whatever. How could that possibly happen? And then I began to realize in some ways, social media and the internet would actually make it
Easier.
in some ways easier to cover it up, because it's not that you cover it up.
Hiding in plain sight.
Exactly. You, I, everyone, all the players these days understand you cannot hide the truth. It's
Yeah.
going to come out. Whatever the incident is, it's going to come out. But what happens is the different versions of the story proliferate. And you've got, and for example, in the book, when you have actually bodies being unearthed from this farm, you've got the very same afternoon on social media, you got,
Yeah.
no, this is
Fake
government
news.
fake news. These are pillows in body bags. Nobody died here. And so that's actually part of classic spy story disinformation plots, is if you want to throw people off the track, you might even commission a couple of books, by so-called experts. And then you've got gossip in the media, and you've got conspiracy theory sites and whatever. But if you have some conspiracy theories that are completely wacko, and I would assume attributing it to
here.
Martians would be wacko, or UFOs flying out of the Bermuda Triangle or whatever. But if somebody happens to speak the truth, some reporter happens to give you a version that's pretty close to what happened, if you want to refute that, you don't say it didn't happen. You don't try to cover it up that way. You don't even have to kill the witnesses. What you simply do is you point to the wacko story and you say, they're saying Martians did that. That's just this is just one of the wacko stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fake news.
And so
Fake
the
news.
truth gets obscured by very sophisticated often. And now,
No.
of course, we've got, and again, it comes back to Gropius's warning, virtual reality is so
Yeah.
real that
Yeah.
in some ways you can't believe what you see anymore. And then
One
now
of the
we've got
darkest-
reputable physicists telling us that our daily lives could be somehow a manifestation of
Yeah,
some
simulation.
reality projected by a super intelligent
someone else's or
being.
something else's
Okay.
vision of you.
But you know something? Well, what are we told in the Old and New Testament? God created this world for us to experience. How is
Yeah.
how is that so different from
It's no
a super
different.
intelligent on a planet,
Well, I can
Epsilon?
see how people can reconcile their faith with science. I've never felt like it was totally opposite. I feel like people can do
Oh
that.
no,
mean,
I would say there's probably quite a lot of. I mean, my father was a scientist who was a Southern Baptist.
But in
Sunday
today's
school
world,
teacher.
it's more there are people that would lead you to believe that it's more polarizing. That it's more like you can't.
Well, again, I think
believe in one
that's
without the other.
exploitation to
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
to a
anti-vax
degree.
movement. Yeah.
I would say also,
Ridiculous.
you can, and again, the theme throughout the Evan Wycliff books is, why is there evil in the world? Why do bad things happen to good people? Well, one thing you can say is, it's likely from a scientific standpoint that God has to play by the rules that God created.
Mhm.
In other words, God created a physical universe that's got physical laws that we can discover, that we can demonstrate. Okay. The difference is that when things happen, they happen because of physical interactions that are happening, and they may have no meaning within a scientific context, but as human beings, it's up to us to make meaning or not out of whatever we experience or observe. But the real gift, if you will, of human experience, and you might call it a curse, depending, is we get to decide what to do about it. You know,
My mom, she was a thoughtful person. You know, on the exterior, you might not have thought so sometimes, but she dabbled in various different religious
Christian
Christian
Science.
Science, Baptist, you know, but her experience with Christian Science was interesting. You know, I shied away from it a little bit because from the outside it seemed like they worshipped. It seemed like they held Mary Baker Eddy on a little bit higher plane than maybe even she may have envisioned. You know.
well, I'm familiar, and then there was a branch of an offshoot of that with Ernest Holmes' religious science, which was not as hard and fast on the non-medical approaches. You know, it
Right.
really permitted, but this idea,
Neither
and
was
this
she.
is one of the things that intrigued me about finding out more about New Age religions, is that the core of them really goes back to ancient Greek philosophy. The idea, you know, and again, Marianne Williamson, Course in Miracles, thoughts are things. You know, we can manifest our reality. Well, that's a Pythagorean idea that, you know, that was very much part of the school of Alexandria and Hypatia's time in 400 AD.
But
And you know,
that library was
that
burned,
humans
though.
can manifest is a very, very old philosophical concept.
Yeah. So, but I guess what I was, so one of the darkest scenarios that I've been hearing lately, is the idea that AI is already out of the bottle, and there are people there are programmers, computer scientists that are going to places now that they know are potentially dystopian, for lack of a better word, because they want to beat the bad actors to the technology. They know that the bad actors are already racing towards it. That the hackers, that the dark web, that type of thing. So
Yeah.
that it's
They're
sort of a
probably bad
self,
actors too.
yeah, it kind of turns everybody into a bad actor. You
Well,
know,
this is the double-edged sword of technology. I mean, you can also say, yes, we've had so much grief with social media and the idea that basically we've automated gossip on a worldwide scale. Okay. And so gossip is news, but gossip is also malicious.
Rumor
or
spreads more
can be.
quickly than ever. Yeah.
Right. But you can also say that we're in the nasty teenager phase of development of internet technology. In other words,
The adolescent.
a lot of us grew out of it, and it may not be a coincidence, because human beings do whatever is necessary to survive. It may not be a coincidence that we've invented a worldwide brain, if you will, neural network, at just the time that we need to act globally to save the place.
Mhm.
You know, how could you possibly deal with if we are going to say that humans are a primary cause of the change in climate, if it is possible to prevent that or mitigate that in any way, how would it be possible to do that with 1950s technology? Impossible.
Yeah.
You couldn't reach everybody. You couldn't, how you, I mean, it just simply a matter of getting people aware of the fact that, plastic bottles are a problem. I lived in Kenya for a couple of years. I saw mountains of plastic bottles. I'm sorry, what?
Just look at the
I
way
said
that
radio
Trump
and
was
transcontinental telegraphs, maybe.
Yeah, there was a difference between a
Trump was able
cablegram
to.
and a telegram and a, let's see, what was the third one? a radiogram.
Yeah.
Because a radiogram was sent to a ship at sea,
Hmm.
and a cablegram actually transversed the transatlantic cable, from
Yeah.
New York to London, and then a telegram was, just over the regular telephone lines. But or
Well,
the
look at the way
the
Trump was able to leverage Twitter to mobilize people or
You talking about
motivate.
it was
January
it was astounding how well that worked for him. I mean, and
No other politician had ever
right, right.
and really none are really exploiting it the
Well,
way.
I will say though that in terms of understanding election demographics and targeting ad campaigns and doing just simply very sophisticated digital public relations, the pioneers there were in the Obama campaign,
Yeah.
and it was very effective. It was very
Yeah.
effective.
Well, I mean, not to get too political.
So
but,
are you a Cardinals fan by chance, or baseball fan at all? So I want to break 30 seconds
You
of
can
baseball
definitely
news.
call me agnostic as a sports fan. When
Uh-huh.
I was in this will date me, but when I was in Kansas City growing up, my grandmother was an avid Kansas City A's fan.
Athletics fan,
And
yeah.
so I got taken to A's games, and my grandmother actually, she sat there. I thought she was working the crossword puzzle, but no, it was this strange arcane baseball scoring diagrams.
Oh, I
She
do
knew
that
how
at
to
every
do
game I
that.
go to.
Yeah, so it was crazy. Yeah, that was late. See, it would be ladies' day, and we would sit in the upper deck. She made sure that I had my sun hat, but
Very cool.
but then of course, um, the world turns,
Yeah.
and I bought the Dallas Cowboys, and no, I've been trying to hide that. No, I have to
Yes,
use
Mr.
Everett.
Jones.
I have to use Everett because there are just a few other writers by the name Gerald Jones. So now if you do an online search for me, most of the hits will be me if you use the whole name.
So Phil, for your benefit, Corbin Burns to the Orioles.
Oh, okay.
Okay, back to our regularly scheduled
Back to our regular scheduled program. Yeah.
Yeah, Gerald, they are members of a rotisserie baseball league dating all the way back to their high school days.
Oh my.
One of the oldest
The 80s,
rotisserie
84,
baseball
85.
leagues in the country.
Well, I knew young men who were commodities traders in Chicago, and
Mhm.
they were like statistical baseball leagues. I mean, they were all about the math, and they would wager. I mean, they're commodities traders. Okay, these are
Yeah.
I said
Yeah.
the version
we
of
just-
today's hedge fund
trusted with
manager.
We
money
each
and
pitch in $15 to cover the website and
Oh,
trophies.
there you go. There you go.
we
Well,
don't have any prizes.
that sounds pretty right.
Might have gone
to
up to 20. I can't remember. It's time to figure that out.
So I had a couple questions I wrote down.
I have one off the top of my head too. If yours are written down, I just don't want to lose mine. So
Okay.
you got involved with New Age religions. Which ones particularly have you studied?
My wife
or-
and I were married in a religious science church, and it was interesting that, as I say, I spent most of my youth as a Southern Baptist, and I was even a student minister,
Yeah.
and it was in Missouri. But then in college, I got very much involved in some of the ancient history, like I'm describing, Hypatia and the Greek philosophers, Pythagorean, um, and not only math but also philosophy.
Right.
And so I've been very much a student of um, meditation and spiritualism, and I've been doing for one of the books I did a lot of research on near-death experience, and there's a big debate in neurology now about the nature of consciousness, and there's a thought that possibly we're more like TV receivers, that we kind of receive consciousness from our environment, and it's not generated from, because the computer people will tell you that they think they're going to be able to generate, but evidently the neurologists think that maybe it would be impossible for at least the way we understand it now for a machine to do that. So yes, I did that, but then my wife, her mother was Slovenian Catholic and her father was Sephardic Jewish. And then they got divorced and she was raised in Catholic schools, but then later she reconnected with her father and discovered a lot of her Jewish traditions. So, the Church of Religious Science was something of a meeting of the minds for us, but it is very much Course in Miracles, kind of thing. I mean, but
Are you
but
familiar
again,
with
this was
Unity?
30 years ago we got married, so I'm
Yeah.
not exactly attending regularly these days.
Are you familiar with Unity?
Oh yes, and Unity is the headquarters of Unity was Lee's Summit, Missouri, which is
In Missouri.
the book has one of the real world locations of the book is the John Knox Assisted Living Center, and that is in Lee Summit.
And in 2004 and 2005, I was on the board of trustees of West Valley Unity. They were in, I guess it was Northridge.
Yeah, Northridge, California.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Never knew that about you, Aaron. That's interesting. Interesting.
Yeah.
fun
Well,
fact.
you've got Unity, you've got religious science, your Christian science, what was all thought of as the new thought movement.
Mhm.
And, Unitarianism, the whole joke about Unitarianism was the only time you hear Jesus Christ is when the janitor falls down the stairs. And I did for a time, I did attend Unitarian church and I met a Sufi Muslim family there. So
Mhm.
yes, it did really cut across.
It's the same kind of thing where everybody has different backgrounds.
Yeah, well, and then Baha'i is another tradition
We would
that
do
basically is founded that way.
we would do like Jewish seders and everything.
Well, I've been to a few.
Yeah, but it was, I mean, through a New Agey church, most of the people weren't of Jewish backgrounds, and it was,
Well,
kind of a
Passover is
cool
very much,
thing.
I think, of all the Jewish traditions, it's kind of like, the Christmas is a commercial holiday that other people participate in besides Christians, and Passover was almost, a feast of spring, and which of course is where Easter and Passover both come from, is the rites of spring. So
Yeah,
we need reasons to celebrate. We need
we do.
reasons to have community, and COVID
Exactly.
certainly convinced us of that. Is like Zoom is never going to replace a good sit down dinner with your family.
That is true.
Yeah.
That is true. Do you got anything else, Aaron? Any?
No, back to your notes.
Okay. Well, one of the ones I had, I've sat in on meetings before where intelligent people bring up topical things in the form of, like bring your own BYOD, bring your own device. And I'm like, first time you hear, you're like, what the hell is that? And then
Device?
you hear the Internet of Things. What is the Internet? Come on, don't just throw shit out
The
there.
Internet of Things is a thing.
Yeah,
I'll give
I
you an
know.
example of
Bring your own
Internet of
device is different.
I'll give you an example of Internet of Things.
My
It's
refrigerator.
I was just going to say, I walked into Best
Yeah,
Buy the other day.
I've since learned what the Internet of Things, but yes, for the sake of people.
Yeah,
in our
no, I mean
audience,
it was capable of scanning the barcodes of the things you put in the refrigerator, so it keeps the inventory what you got in there. It could even recognize, and it could know the difference between an orange and an apple, and it's going to tell you, well, you're getting low on
Mine
spaghetti
just tells
sauce.
me if somebody left the door open.
Well,
Oh
I go into
yes.
Thornton's now, and there's a teller. You set your stuff down, and it detects whether you have a hot dog, whether it's or a canned item or something
Yeah,
like that.
we're talking like basically it's a Midwestern 7-Eleven.
Although I'm wondering if that's done with a can.
You know?
Actually, I don't know.
Well, the interconnectedness of things could be, I mean, with these technologies, it's possible. We find that it's possible to do something. How we apply it often is something that evolves, and it's certainly true of AI.
That's true.
But I will say that there are some really tangible, real world developments of benefits of AI that we can point to today, and that is the development of electronic health records. And again, can talk about abusive metadata, yes, if the wrong people got in there, but basically, metadata doesn't have or shouldn't have the names of patients on it. But a doctor should be able to, if he's saying that you have this particular form of cancer, he should be able to go in and see, based on the history of millions of people, what worked best, what's most cost effective, which one will your insurance cover, how long will it take, what are the side effects, and to the extent that that can be tailored to your body chemistry, which we differ one from another, just in terms of the way that some things perform in our bodies. AI would have the ability to refine that, and to some extent, in terms of diagnostics, be quote unquote smarter than any individual human being.
Yeah.
But it would be something that expert human beings could consult to say, well, that's right, the system says this, and weigh but we've got to be wise about it. But I
Well,
would
what I
say
was building
also,
to-
they all talked about the idea of medical diagnosis as an app. And, if you've got people running around in disadvantaged circumstances, they can't afford treatment, or they don't have any coverage, or they're in a rural place where there is no treatment. Um, they may be able to get better medical attention than they would get otherwise, because it's going to be on their phone.
Well, so what I was building to, you use the term false flag operation. What is a real life example? Because that's kind of what we're talking about with Obadiah's his vision for the second coming.
Well,
right?
the case that I cite of the fake second coming of Christ in Cuba, that would be a false flag operation. In other words, but to take a real world example, when the Russians came into the Ukraine, they claimed that it wasn't them. They said it was a bunch of mercenaries that were acting independently. Okay, that would be a false flag. In other words, these guys are not they're not wearing the uniforms of the Russian Federation. They're wearing mercenary uniforms, or they're wearing anonymous fatigues, whatever. They're not carrying a flag, or if they are carrying a flag, they're carrying the flag of not of the government that they are representing, and that is typically
Black ninja suits.
a false a false flag operation. So basically, especially in the spy story world, John le Carre and Graham Greene and that kind of thing, where an intelligence organization will, a spy organization will concoct some kind of event, whether it be an attack or terrorism or whatever, and with the intent of blaming it on either their adversary or somebody that they want to
Gotcha.
to blame, then
Got a question?
those things have been tried. And one of the lessons of the John le Carre stories that have been based on false flag operation is how stupid and pointless and backfiring they tend to be. As written by somebody who kind of understands that at a deep level,
And never
which
tend
he did.
to actually have the result that they intended when they conceived of them. You had a
Okay,
question.
now Philip had one question up here. If you could cast your streaming series, who would play Wycliff and who would play Obadiah?
Wow, you'd think I would have thought about that.
No pressure.
Obadiah, I write him as mixed race, kind of. I have him coming up as an
Kinda
underprivileged
slight.
boy in the South, and he might not even know who his father is. He knows the fellow that jilted his mother and left, but both he and his sister are disadvantaged kids, and they and they have suffered from all kinds of prejudice, but then they also, because they've suffered from prejudice, they also seem to know how to exploit it. So I think that a variety of people from different backgrounds identify with Obadiah because they're kind of like not quite sure who he is or where he came from. Now,
Mhm.
Evan's kind of a white bread boy from, from the farm. And as that area of Missouri, the Indians were chased out of there in 1830s. That's why you have the plot of Killers of Flower Moon, is that Osage Indians were chased into Oklahoma, but that was a Missouri tribe.
Okay.
And
I tend to see that. It looks really good.
that it's an extremely graphic movie, but very heart-wrenching
Been
and
dedicated a long
and
time.
violent, but
It's
certainly
really
the
long
history
too,
that it's
isn't it?
based on, you could say it deserves to be told.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
It's
as we're
like 3+
winding down
hours,
here-
right?
Yeah, it's 3+ hours. It sure is. Yeah.
yeah, and again,
Well, and that's where
the
you've
idea
got.
of the
That's
2 hour
one that
format,
I would wait for
because we've
home for
got
that.
cable, it's not as important anymore because people can pause it and go to the bathroom or grab
Right.
themselves a
Thank
sandwich.
That is true.
I also, though, if they're gonna put 3+ hour movies at the movie theaters, they need to bring back an intermission.
You know
I
what?
think in
Theaters
many
got in
places they
trouble.
have.
Theaters got
Many
in
places
trouble
they
for putting
have.
an intermission in this one. Scorsese didn't want an intermission.
That's his problem.
Well,
Yeah.
no,
It didn't do better in the theaters.
contractually they weren't allowed to, and
That's why it didn't do better in the theaters.
Well, I
it
don't
did
know how-
very well in the theaters.
So as we wind down,
I know
here-
2 tickets it didn't get.
I did watch it on streaming, so I confess that.
No, it's already
and
streaming.
I'm pretty sure we
Yeah.
paused it a couple times.
No,
Oh, at least.
absolutely.
All right. Gerald, as we wind down here, are you open to playing a little game that we play? We close out our episodes with.
It's a bracket
It's
thing.
an 8.
I'll try to hold up my end of it. Sure.
It's all you. It's all you. It's kind of like a Ginger or Marianne type scenario,
No.
but it's with
Yeah.
authors.
Yeah.
Yes, it's with authors.
Yes.
So what I did is I took all but one of the authors we've done book club episodes on and listed them and had Aaron come up with alternate authors, and then I'm going to pose those 2 authors to you, and you're going to tell me which one you prefer. And we're going to do that for
Which
4
I
different
prefer?
matchups.
Yeah. Okay.
Or
To the extent that I even know them,
or
sure.
who would win in a thumb wrestling
None of
fight or
them.
whatever you want. I mean,
Most of them.
there's no
I think you'll-
stakes here. Don't worry.
Who would win in a battle royal at the
Or pissing contest. Oh, we were trying
Pissing
to try one of
contest.
those
Exactly.
in the wind.
Yeah. Okay.
I forget
First
my
square.
responses now, so I'm just as excited as anybody.
Oh, good. So we got Kurt Vonnegut versus Philip K. Dick.
That's a tough choice. I mean, I've read more Vonnegut than I have Philip K. Dick, and I would say because of his cynical sense of humor, I would go with Vonnegut. I mean, Dick certainly his, his dystopian stuff is chilling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about you,
Those are
Aaron?
my 2 favorite authors, it turns out. But we did
Yeah,
Kurt
he got me
Vonnegut,
with
Sirens
number
of
4.
Titan in our last episode of Between the Covers.
Yeah. Which is your favorite?
We have a book club.
Oh, I have to
Vonnegut
answer
or-
too?
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
Slaughterhouse-Five, there's no humor, whatever. I mean, it's just as grim as any of the.
Well,
Philip K. Dick.
it gets pretty weird with the Tralfamadorians later on in it.
Yeah. All right. Rubber meets the road.
I
I'll
don't
get
know,
back to
man.
you. What about you, Lise?
Dick.
It's like picking your children.
All right. Well, now you're really on the spot because you're the tiebreaker. Picking your children. Oh,
Nah, I'll say Vonnegut.
Vonnegut. All right. Okay. So Sherilyn Kenyon versus Anne Rice. Gerald.
I only know Anne Rice and only from the adaptations of her stuff to the movies, so
Okay.
not a fan of vampirism, really.
Yeah, Sherilyn Kenyon does a mixture of vampire with
This was like
Um,
softcore lady porn, I'd say.
Yeah.
it's softcore lady porn, but it is also
It's,
it uses mythology with
It's
vampirism.
what we refer to in this house as dirty girl books.
Yeah.
I know a mid-list author, and she writes sci-fi porn.
Nice.
This is very close to that.
I've not dipped into her stuff.
Yeah. What was that thing from Sherilyn? What's her last name?
Kenyon.
Kenyon Acheron. It was all like Greek and Roman gods, or I don't know, it was Atlantean gods. Yeah, it was pretty out there.
The Greek gods were mentioned, but the Atlantean
Yeah.
gods were destroyed. And that's when
Spoilers.
Atlantis was sunk.
All right, Lise.
What's the next
versus
one?
Rice.
You know what? I'm going to go with Sherilyn because I've read more of her books.
Okay. So Aaron, you
So
got
maybe she's just got more books.
to break the tie, Aaron.
I'm going Anne Rice.
And Rice.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
Not a problem.
her dirty girl books are better.
And Gerald, you might not
Sleeping
know
Beauty
this-
stuff.
Sleeping Beauty stuff. Well, I know you know this one. John Steinbeck versus Sarah Gruen. And Sarah Gruen wrote Water for Elephants.
Oh, that's right.
Oh yes, I read that. I read Water for Elephants.
I'm going to go with Sarah.
Okay.
Sorry.
Well, no, it would have to be Steinbeck. I mean, just because of the scope of his work.
Right,
But
right.
Water for Elephants is a brilliant book. And
Yeah. I
and
was presented
deserved-
with her name, and Steinbeck was the name I responded with.
Yeah, no,
So you would be-
she's certainly deserving of credit, but Steinbeck
Yeah.
Steinbeck made a huge cultural contribution at a time when the nation
Grapes of Wrath.
kind of needed to
Yeah.
know about that
Yeah.
part of California and really, the plight of immigrant labor. I mean, I don't know that anybody was really Upton Sinclair, maybe before that, with
Yeah.
talking about the slaughterhouses, but
I think I thought
that was a
I think
real
Water
huge
for Elephants
contribution
had
to
some
American history.
Grapes of Wrath vibes to it a little bit.
It did.
hmm
I agree with that. Some of the characters at the circus reminded you of the
Yeah,
the,
down on their
tall-
luck drifters. Yeah, the hobos thrown off the train and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, right.
And okay, so Anne McCaffrey versus Terry Pratchett, Lise.
I got to go with my Anne.
And
And it's a mean trick.
that's
I'm
why-
going Terry Pratchett.
created an entire universe to
Yeah.
which I am devoted.
Well, we
It is one of
did.
the most
I love the
hilarious things I
Discworld
have ever
stuff.
read.
Yeah.
Huh?
I love the Discworld stuff. I'm going Terry Pratchett. So we'll let
Yeah.
Okay,
we'll let our
so-
guests break the tie.
Yeah, no, pass on that. I both of those names I whiff.
You don't
It's
know them.
I have no
Okay.
idea.
All right, so I'll break the tie then.
Well, you've probably read No Terry Pratchett, so you're gonna go.
Well, Terry Pratchett wrote the alternate history books, right? Didn't he write it?
I
No.
don't
Okay.
know.
And
You're thinking
McCaffrey.
of Terry Goodkind, I think.
I'm gonna go with McCaffrey.
Okay.
All right. So our round 2 is Vonnegut versus Anne Rice, Gerald.
Oh, it has to be Vonnegut.
Vonnegut.
Vonnegut. Okay. Lise.
Vonnegut.
Okay, he's a sweep.
Sorry.
You're apologizing to Anne Rice.
Yeah.
And then
But she's dead though, so
Steinbeck versus
That's
Anne
fine.
McCaffrey.
well, we assume she is.
Gerald.
Oh yeah, Steinbeck. I mean,
Steinbeck.
really, he's
McCaffrey. I'm not
Stein-
letting you sweeper.
Steinbeck.
All right. And this is our final. This is the greatest writer aside from Gerald on the episode.
On the episode.
Vonnegut
By the way,
versus-
I want to say this is probably the third or fourth time that I've finished a book within an hour of the episode beginning. I finished about 20 minutes before.
yeah, good job.
But I always seem to cut it close and finish right on time, and it keeps it fresh in your mind. But
Just like your
I
homework,
really did
remember?
enjoy the book, and
I did too. Yeah.
all of its little twists and turns. I don't want to spoil
Right.
Well, I
anything that we
do
haven't already
often,
spoiled.
I when I wrote business and technical books, of which I wrote a lot, of course, I always had to write to an outline, but as this is my 14th novel, and I really do not write to an outline anymore. And I find that it does increase the possibility that I will surprise myself with a twist
Yeah.
because I like twists and I know readers do. And so if I delight myself, hopefully I delight you guys.
Cool. So were you delighted when you wrote this one?
Well, absolutely, because this
Excellent.
one, I think it was one of the more complex plots because it had so many different elements. And I chose first person for Evan, which was a break from the past because I really wanted to see how he reacted to things, some of these horrible things that were happening. I needed to have his internal monologue a lot. And so, but then I had to have ways of showing the things that he couldn't experience or didn't know about. So I had to have some third party chapters as well. So weaving those in was a challenge. And for a while, I didn't think I was going to be able to resolve it. The plot just seemed like it was just so gnarly, I wasn't going to get there. And yet it did. And I was pleased with the way it.
I enjoyed like a lot of the nuance, the technical expertise. Your technical expertise came through on it. Your theological
thank you.
knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
And
Yeah, the
it was
whole
well
idea of how to
written, and
do
shout
how
out
to
to
do
your
an
proofreaders
encrypted
and copy,
message
and
book
all that too.
ciphers. That required some research.
Yeah, the book cipher was cool.
Right.
Well, it's
I
an
didn't know
old
if-
it's an old ploy, and
It's an old spy ploy, but I didn't
yeah,
know
it's
if
in
that
the
was
spy
spoiler to
stories,
bring it up.
Nikita
Yeah.
Rebecca, but of
You're a
course
spy,
there have to
man.
be new wrinkles on doing that if
Yeah,
somebody
yeah,
were to
and
attempt it.
it's not the classic way entirely.
All right, our final Vonnegut versus Steinbeck. Gerald. That's
Personally, I'd have to say Vonnegut.
Vonnegut.
Yeah.
Wow, upset.
You already made me choose between my two favorite authors, so Vonnegut's going to reign supreme over whoever else is.
Down to you, sweetie.
Doesn't really matter.
I mean, doesn't really matter. You gotta pick. You gotta pick
He
one.
already won.
No.
Oh, is it a sweep or not?
Fine.
Did you say? You said. Oh no, you did say.
We
you
both said Vonnegut.
Yeah.
Okay, my bad.
Yeah.
All right.
I guess Steinbeck
Drum roll,
because I
please.
find Vonnegut to be a little misogynistic.
Vonnegut.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
so
he's
one
cynical
protest.
too. I
So
mean,
Steinbeck.
he really is a cynic.
Yeah.
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 Well, yeah, I can handle cynicism as much as just, the He-Man Woman Haters Club.
Yeah.
What I
I
say
think he
about
just
Vonnegut is
I think
I
he
like
just
the way-
knew that he didn't understand women and wasn't good at writing them, so he didn't.
Okay.
Did he say that?
I'm willing to.
I think he did say something to that effect, yeah.
What I'll say about him is I felt like it was a wild, literally wide-ranging interplanetary story that really spun kind of it was very much of the 60s, it was almost like a Jimi Hendrix guitar solo that is so complicated and different,
and
but
yet
then
seems
but then it
simple.
made sense as a whole.
Yeah.
It made sense.
I like the whole motive thing. I like the getting the homeless off the streets bit gone
Yeah.
awry.
All right, Gerald, this has been great. I don't you've been
Yeah,
generous with
thanks
your
for being
time.
on.
Really
It's been
appreciate
fun.
it.
Thanks
Is there
thanks
I
for
do
the book.
appreciate the invitation
It's a
and
very
the
fresh
opportunity to
book.
play the game however lamely I did.
No, you did
No,
great.
you did
No,
great.
you did
You
great.
did great.
Yeah, you did
There's no
fine.
winners or well, I guess there
There's
are
no
winners
real
and losers, but it's
expectation. This
in
has
this case the
replaced
losers are mostly dead authors.
This has replaced our question of the episode. How many bathrooms were there on the Death Star?
Yeah, you're free to answer that too if you like.
You're not
Or
gonna-
not?
You're not gonna touch it.
A lot
My
of
favorite
people
answers are
prefer
0 or
none.
1.
Yeah, one. One's the most popular.
Just a big
I
line of
think.
stormtroopers going around the place, kicking
Well,
their feet.
I would think that waste disposal might not be too difficult.
Yeah, they got their suits.
Yeah.
Right.
That's where the 0 that's usually the line of reasoning for the zeros.
So where can people find your book?
GeraldEverettJones.com, Gerald with a G, Everett with 2 T's, and there's downloads for review copies, and there's the entire fiction book list there, all 14 books, and some are romantic comedies. There's a series of 3 romantic comedies, the first of which is called My Inflatable Friend, which is something of a skirt chasing story, pre-Me Too, by the way, and then historical fiction, literary fiction, and then the 4 Preacher books. So
Yeah. You had one about charts too. How to Lie with Charts.
How to Lie with Charts is a business book that is taught at the college level, Georgetown, among other places. It has 2 new chapters, relatively new chapters, 11 ways to generate fake news and use and abuse of metadata. So I felt like I had to include those, even though they're not charts per se, although there are charts to support them.
They're relevant though.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
evocative, very interesting.
Some
All
people
You also
thought
have a
people thought it was a
Substack, too.
how-to book for liars, and I don't know how you explain it to
No, it's
folks.
Yeah.
People are
Yeah.
gonna take it the way they're gonna take it.
It's more a debunking book, right?
Well, there was a book in the 50s called How to Lie with Statistics, and it was kind of a cartoony
Yeah.
satire,
Yeah.
and so I confess I borrowed
I'm
the
assuming
title.
that's what Fox
there's
News
what-
is based on.
Who's
Sort of,
the quote? Who had the quote? Lies, damn lies, and statistics.
Well, I've heard
Three
it.
kinds of
I've heard it
untruths.
attributed to Mark Twain, but it's like the Churchill quotes too. It's
Yeah.
like you dig back in it and
I
you find it's been attributed
I
to
have a
just about
feeling it
everybody.
wasn't Mark Twain, that one, but could have been.
You're sort of the amazing,
But
It
yeah,
sounds so
I'm sure it
fun.
was attributed to him.
sort of the amazing Randy of academia.
Yeah. Are you getting
right.
rained on today? Are you in? Did I read you're in
No.
Santa Monica?
Yes, it poured this morning. Yeah,
Yeah, rained
Well,
from
it
about
was
11
it
p.m. to
was a
9 a.m.
genuine
here.
monsoon style rain, which we have
Yeah.
not had in some time.
Windy
But
as
we're
all
trying to
get out.
replenish the Colorado
We're
River.
glad
So
for you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, we needed it.
His grandkids go crazy whenever
When
when
it
it
when it
rains, yes.
rains.
maybe not so
Aaron's
much anymore.
grandsons love it when it rains.
But when we
Oh,
visited,
except
it
it's-
rained.
It's going to ruin their baseball practices.
well, I have
Right.
two Jack Russell terrorists who refuse to go outside when it rains.
Jack Russell terrorists.
Jack Russell. All right. with
You heard
that-
them a
I
moment
believe
ago. They
we
were
had one of those.
That's-
I get it.
That's a funny line to go out on.
they're
Social.
Twitter,
Yeah, pod.
Instagram,
Yeah, pod.
Facebook.
Yeah, pod. So let us know. Hit us back. Have a great week.